Morning world, it's about 8:15 a.m. on the 31st of March 2021. Last night I found myself unplanned having a 2-hour conversation on one of these social apps. I think it was called Clubhouse, with a bunch of other astrologers around the nature of the gods and our planet's gods, and if they're not, then what's the overpowering force behind the planets. And it turned into one of those long discussions. It was really stimulating. It was polite, civil, everyone had their turn at speaking. It was really good, and lots of new ideas there. And it got me thinking when I came off that last night. I thought, well, are the planets gods, and do we have this, is there this planetary influence that actually directly affects us? And then I realised, over this last week, there's been this really strange thing happening in the Suez Canal, where a very large container ship has been blocking global trade, allegedly costing the planet billions of dollars each day in terms of trade. And I'm much more concerned around all the animals that have had to be put down because they were stuck in their containers in unbearable heat without food and water. That to me is much more important than the billions of dollars being wiped off the stock markets. And there's a number of pictures been released of the container ship being at an angle and blocking the canal. And there's some fascinating pictures of these minute little diggers comparatively being pulled in to put out the sand so that this gigantic container ship can float away. Little and large, truly. And there was all this stories about, oh, we can't get it free, the stern's stuck, the bow's stuck, we've shifted 20,000 tons of sand and it's still really stuck. Oh, we've got to dredge the bottom of the canal from underneath, and we may have to lift all the containers off and pump the fuel out and get the ballast out, and it's going to take months. And then 36 hours ago it was full moon. The sun and the moon were opposite each other in the sky, with the earth in between. And the moon was much closer to the earth than normal. It was at perigee, the closest to the earth on its monthly cycle yesterday, and the full moon was the night before. So a combination of the full moon with the sun and the moon pulling apart from each other with the earth in the middle would have had a stronger than normal effect upon the tides. And the fact that the moon is closer to the earth than normal at the moment would also have had a stronger effect upon the tides. So there was a very high tide in that part of the world yesterday. And the New York Times reported, and I got this from space.com last night, the New York Times report, well actually it was sent to me by one of my regular clients, and you know who you are, so thank you for that. Space.com yesterday reported that the New York Times was reporting that the tide in that area was 18 inches, 46 centimetres higher than normal. As a result, the Ever Given was able to float off and free itself of a blockage. Now it seems to me that with all the salvage companies, all the specialist floating organisations, all of the diggers, all trying to free it up and nothing was working, and then the sun and moon took a hand. And gravity and the tides freed that ship. To me, this is a classic example of the gods, if you like, having a direct impact. If the planets are gods, then the gods had a direct impact on the global economy. I find it surreal, to be honest, that one ship blocking one waterway can affect the global economy so much. It shows you how thin and how narrow the options are, that if one little thing like that can go wrong and the whole world screws up, then there's something wrong with the system somewhere. And then I got to thinking a bit more. What we were seeing yesterday was an opposition. The sun and the moon were opposite each other, viewed from an Earth-based perspective. And although it wasn't a complete straight line, it was more of a kinky straight line, but you did have the Earth in between the Sun and the Moon, because that's what happens at full moon. If it was an exact straight line, that's when we get an eclipse, and it wasn't an eclipse yesterday. But it was still pretty close, so it was almost a straight line, which is why the gravitational pull on the Earth, thus the tidal range, was so extreme. But I thought, well, that's what the power of an opposition does. When two planets are opposite each other in the sky, at least from an Earth-based perspective, it creates a gravitational pull, putting two things away, creating an upsurge of energy in the middle, which is what happened on the tides. And that's the nature of an opposition. The same happens when it's a conjunction, where two planets in the sky are in the same place, putting the energy of the Earth one particular way instead of two separate ways, which is the opposition. And it got me thinking about the nature of these aspects. Of course, global trade is flowing again now. And this is not an April Fool's joke. And tomorrow, on April Fool's Day, as it happens, I'm starting the third module of my beginner's course in astrology. And I've done the stuff on the signs and the sun, the moon, the ascendant and the midheaven in the signs. And I've talked about the individual planets. So this third module is going to be on aspects. And I'm going to be looking at all of the different aspects between the individual planets in the sky and what they mean in a birth or natal chart. And the first session tomorrow night is actually going to be on the nature of aspects, not just the conjunction and the opposition and the trine and the square and the sextile, but also the minor aspects like the quintile, the decile, the biquintile, the sesquiquadrate, the semi-square, and particularly the inconjunction. And then I'm going to be explaining these over the course of the weeks in terms of looking at the individual planets connected. And there's still a few places left. If anyone wants to join in on this course, then drop me a line today at the normal email, and I'll get back to you. But it seems strange, all of a sudden, just in this last few days, the nature of aspects, particularly the conjunction and the opposition, seem to have suddenly come to the fore. And I find it fascinating that despite humanity's best efforts, we could not get one ship floated because it dug itself so deeply into sand, and then the sun and the moon took a hand. Over the millennia, we can trace cultural development. According to historians, we can trace cultural development back to about 4,800 BC, where all of a sudden the Sumerian culture developed with alphabets and tax inspectors and regulated streets and kings and queens, and it appeared out of nowhere, if modern history is to be believed, which I don't. And since that time, we've always had this pantheon of gods, predominantly male, patriarchal. And I find it fascinating because to me, the original sun, the original god and the original goddess have always been the sun and the moon. The true representation of masculinity and femininity as they shine onto the earth, equal and opposite. They are the same size to our naked eye. And if they weren't, we wouldn't get eclipses. That's a subject for another day. The power of the planets. They create such gravity and such an effect upon our lives, and such a classic example in the last few days. Catch you later, world. Bye.